Good afternoon, everybody. Just going to give everyone a few seconds to join the webinar and then we'll get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Just going to give everyone a second to join the webinar and then we'll get started our conversation today. Welcome, welcome. All right, just another couple seconds. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Just giving everyone a second to join the webinar and then we'll get started. Okay, so we'll let other people join us as they come in, but I'll get started for the sake of everybody's time. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Cooking for Reducing Disease Risk. Today's focus is osteoporosis. My name is Amy Rosenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and member of the community health team at Northern Westchester Hospital, which is part of Northwell Health, located in Mount Kisco, New York. Welcome. I see some familiar names, so welcome back for those of you who've been in the kitchen with me before. If you haven't been a part of this monthly series, welcome. So nice to have you join us today. Throughout this program, I will be talking to you about some tips related to osteoporosis, some information about it, putting some culinary tips and tricks into practice to give you some help of ways to eat better to reduce your risk for osteoporosis or continued progression of osteoporosis. And we will also be demonstrating 3 recipes today. You should have received those recipes in your email inbox from chl@northwell.edu. They don't come from Eventbrite, they come from chl@northwell.edu. If you do not receive them for any reason, you can either put your name and your email in the chat box and I'll be sure to get them to you after the program is over. Or you will also have a survey that pops up automatically at the end of this program on your screen. And there will be a field for you to put questions and comments. And you could put questions and comments, I did not receive the recipes, please send them to me in that field. As well, if you have any other questions or if you need a referral for any physicians or would like to see a dietitian to speak about any of these ideas, you can also put your name and your email address in the survey box or the chat box at any time. This program is being recorded, so for any reason you can't stay for the whole time or you'd like to share it with somebody else or you'd like to refer back to this program, you will get a link to the program recording by the end of the week. So I invite you to look out for your email to have that link sent out to you, again, from chl@northwell.edu. And then lastly, if you have any questions during the program, you can certainly put them in the chat box. I monitor them as we're presenting. I try to answer as many questions as I can in real time. I will also be answering some of the questions that you submitted in pre-registration that I will definitely, a lot of them are going to automatically be addressed during the program, but I took to heart some of them that needed some extra attention and I will be addressing those during the program as well. I'll be tilting my screen up and down so you can see my hands when I'm presenting the cooking information or cooking recipes, excuse me, and trying to look at the chat box at the same time. So if there's a little bit of a delay in me getting to your question, please forgive me, it's because the screen is tilted down. Without further ado, I think we'll get started. Oh, one other thing, some of you asked me about written materials. If for any reason, and if you feel strongly about that, I can send you a link to the internet presentation, which is, as you can see, synced with my Zoom today, and that will have all of the notes and information in that, so that I could send if anybody would like that. All right, so I got all the business done out of the way, and now we can get started. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to be talking about bone health in general and what osteoporosis and osteopenia are. We're going to be talking about bone building foods, what to focus on, and what foods are and nutrients are important to focus on for building bone health. Again, these classes are about reducing your risk for disease. So it's not about necessarily treatment, but if any of you have been told you have osteoporosis or have osteopenia, in this case, you can definitely apply it to prevent further progression. And we'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to teach you about how to put some of these recommendations into action in your kitchen through some culinary tips and tricks, as well as some suggestions on ways to incorporate the foods into your everyday diet. And then, of course, cooking demonstrations. Okay. Great, here we go. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit of basics here. When we talk about bone health, what are our bones responsible for, right? So our bones are there to support and protect us, to keep our bodies physically upright and moving, as well as to protect us. Like, for example, our skull helps to protect our brains. So bones are really important. They allow us to move. They allow us to avoid injury. They also help us to store minerals when our body needs them. So our bones are a huge source or bank of different minerals like calcium and phosphorus, for example, that our body keeps in store for when our body needs it. It will break down and go into our bloodstream and be attended and distributed to where it needs to go throughout the body. So until you hit the age of 30, your body is very good and very used to breaking down old bone and replacing it with new bone tissue. It's constantly turning over, similar to if you were to get a cut on your hand, there would be a scab that would form over that cut, and then new skin would form. Same thing with your bone. Your bone is breaking down and being replaced with new bone. But after the age of 30, and really once we hit our late 30s and into our 40s and 50s, the problem might be is that there's more bone being broken down than is being replaced. So the goal ultimately is to keep as much bone as possible that prevent the bone breakdown as you age, especially as women get older and older, men get older and older, especially women getting closer and closer to menopause. My slides are not cooperating with me today. Okay. All right. So what is osteoporosis? So we like to call osteoporosis the silent disease because really there are no symptoms until something goes wrong. There's no symptoms. It's when your bones are weakened to the point that they can break really easily. So how do we know you have osteoporosis? You fall and break your hip or your shoulder or your wrist. Really, really simply, have an X-ray or a CAT scan, a bone scan, and your doctor says, "Oh, yep, that section of your body was osteoporotic, and that's why it broke so easily." And it's extremely common. It affects 1 in 5 women and 1 in 20 men over the age of 50. So what our goal is to prevent this from happening. And the first stage of knowing this might happen is what's called osteopenia. So osteopenia is the stage where you're starting to lose bone mass. Bone density is another word you might have heard before. And this can be assessed. We're going to talk about that through different testing. And osteoporosis at this point is preventable. It's your bones are weak in certain areas, but they're not quite osteoporotic, and you can maintain your bone in that area. And that's where, if your doctor lets you know about that, that's where taking some action and some intervention can really, really help to slow the progression and reduce the risk of osteoporosis. Okay, so what are the risk factors? You might have heard there are some that are controllable and some that are not controllable. So diet, the foods that we eat, the amount that we exercise and the type we exercise, and we're going to talk about that. Being underweight actually is a significant risk factor. Again, sometimes that's something you can control and sometimes that's something you can't. Whether or not you smoke cigarettes, definitely cigarettes increases your risk of being osteoporotic. The amount of alcohol you intake. So heavier drinkers tend to be more at risk for osteoporosis. Certain medications that you're prescribed for different conditions. Again, that's something that you might be in your control and might not, something to talk to your doctor about. Generally, that might not be something entirely in your control. Your age definitely is something you can't control. Increased risk of osteoporosis as we age. Born gender, what you're born with, level of hormones, women are more at risk than men. Familial history, so if you have a higher people with osteoporosis in your family, you're more likely to have it in your case as well. So it's a genetic factor, and there's an ethnic factor as well. Certain ethnic groups are more predisposed to osteoporosis. Okay, so how do you know? So your doctor may recommend you have what's called bone density testing. It's a completely painless, non-invasive test. I myself, when I was going through my training, had to have one, and it was like having an X-ray. Nothing uncomfortable about it. And they assess how strong your bones are as compared to an average of what healthy bones are. It's called a T-score. And when you assess your T-score, you'll be put in different categories of healthy bones, osteopenic, or osteoporotic. And they assess in different areas of your body. And different areas of your body might be totally healthy, and then other pieces might be osteoporotic. For example, your legs, your hips might be totally fine if you do a lot of walking, but if you never do any upper body exercise, maybe the upper half of your body is osteopenic or osteoporotic. So it varies in different parts of your body, which is why it's really good to get a full bone density test as often as your doctor will prescribe. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force recommends that women ages 65 and older be tested for osteoporosis on a fairly regular basis. And if you're under the age of 65, an increased risk for osteoporotic related fracture, depending on different related factors that your doctor may assess, then you're considered definitely in high risk, and you should be taking the bone density test. Speak to your doctor about when is appropriate to have the tests and how often for you. And again, it's completely painless, non-invasive, something that everybody should do if you haven't before. Okay, so when we're talking about maintaining strong bones or preventing progression from osteopenia into osteoporosis, or maintaining your bone density as it is, preventing further more severe osteoporosis, this is what we're going to really focus on today. So really what we want to really talk about is living a healthy lifestyle and what that means. And the main focus of that, yes, we talked about alcohol. When we say excessive alcohol consumption, we mean more than 1 drink a day for women, more than 2 drinks per day for men, smoking, those types of habits. But today we're really going to focus on exercise and food, nutrition. So when we talk about exercise, we talk about, you may have heard, resistance, weight bearing, those types of words, and what exactly does that mean? So we're talking about things that are going to create a low impact or impact to your body, and weight bearing. So that means things like weights, lifting weights, walking, because the impact of your legs hitting the ground, that's considered impact. Hiking, running, or jogging, which necessarily isn't the right fit for everybody, but walking is just as good. Climbing stairs, again, it's your heel hitting the ground, climbing the stairs on impact. Tennis, because you're running, or other sports. Tennis tends to be a very nice sport to continue as you age. Dancing can be another good example. And any other weight-bearing, body-resistant exercises like push-ups or pull-ups, weight resistance, weight-bearing bands that you might pull, yoga, Pilates, things like that. But the idea is to think about impact. So it is your heel or your arm bearing some type of weight, your heel hitting the ground. That is what is considered a weight-bearing exercise. So for example, a bicycle is not a weight-bearing exercise. The elliptical machine at the gym, that is not a weight-bearing exercise because there's no impact there, if that makes sense. Put questions in the chat about that, but the goal is to aim for 30 minutes of this type of exercise every day, incorporating that. So whether that means 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the afternoon, or 10 minutes in the evening, 30 minutes all in one shot. If you don't get to it every day, okay, but that's our goal. And if you set a goal for yourself to make sure you hit all areas, the top half and the bottom half, so maybe you're going for 30 minutes of walking, but you're not doing any weight bearing exercise for your arms and your upper body, adding that goal in to incorporate that. Okay, so nutrition. When we talk about food and nutrition related to preventing osteoporosis and building bone health, we're talking about various nutrients. Now, I am not the dietitian that likes to think of things in terms of nutrients, because I'm a whole food dietitian. I like to think about things in terms of food and food choices, and as a culinary dietitian, how we can mix things together and create creative things in the kitchen. But I do want to point out what the nutrients are so you have a basic understanding. So most of us know that when we talk about bone health, we're talking about calcium. That's the big one. We're talking about vitamin D. Vitamin D and calcium work together like a lock and a key. So without vitamin D, calcium isn't absorbed. Without calcium, vitamin D, they go together. Is the goal. So we have calcium, vitamin D, those are the biggies that you hear all the time, but there's also magnesium, another mineral, phosphorus, zinc, potassium, and 2 more vitamins, vitamin K and vitamin A. Now, I like to really emphasize that a well-balanced diet in general is what's important for bone health. It's not just making sure you have enough of these types of minerals and vitamins. That's really how we're going to build a strong basis and a foundation here. But it is important to recognize that certain things are harder for certain people to get, like vitamin K, for example, or vitamin D, right? So we're going to pay close attention to how we can do that through food versus through supplementation. If your doctor has recommended that you have supplementation, that is something that you can discuss with him or her. However, I would say that as a gold standard, even if you are taking a supplement, it's really, really important to still eat these things from food. Because research shows that the amount of food you absorb, so your body actually breaks down and gets into your bloodstream and where it needs to go from a supplement, is about 50%, versus from food, it's much more readily absorbable. So even if you are getting these things from your supplement, you still want to focus on eating a balanced diet that incorporates a lot of these nutrients. It's not it's a catch-all, like it'll give you a little bit of the amount that you might be missing, but it's not a substitution. Okay. So what foods support bone health? When you think about those nutrients I said before, here's a list of foods that we're talking about that have the highest content, right? There might be ones that have other content, traces amount, but this is the highest content of all those other nutrients we talked about before. 1 second. I'm just checking to make sure there are no questions so far, and I don't think I see any. Okay. All right. So when we're talking about calcium, certainly we're talking about dairy products. However, it doesn't have to be. Dairy products meaning milk, low-fat milk, cheese in small portions, yogurt, things like that. But it really doesn't have to be. If you see on this list here, it's just one line. The foods that generally support bone health, we have fortified tofu and edamame beans are a wonderful source of calcium. Fortified non-dairy milks like almond milks and oat milks, as well as some orange juices. I'm not the biggest fan of recommending juice. I would rather you eat a whole orange than have supplemented orange juice. But in very small portions, 4 ounces, for example, is perfectly fine for most of us. However, discuss it with your doctor if it's of concern, especially if you're diabetic. But non-dairy milks and orange juices are fortified, which means they add the nutrient in, and that's perfectly fine. Green leafy vegetables. I cannot speak highly enough about green leafy vegetables in every area of nutrition and for medical conditions. But they are super high in all of the nutrients we talked about before, including calcium. So they're wonderful and really important for bone density. In a lot of Asian cultures, for example, there's a huge emphasis on getting calcium from green leafy vegetables and a lot of de-emphasis on calcium products. And that's perfectly fine. Dairy products. And that's perfectly fine. Getting tons of green leafy vegetables into your diet is a wonderful way to incorporate most of these minerals, as well as cabbages, bok choy. Mushrooms is a unique source of vitamin D. Vitamin D is generally a vitamin we get absorbed through our skin from the sun. It's actually technically a hormone, not a vitamin, but it's really hard to get, especially for those of us who are conscious of skin cancer and wearing sunscreen. As you can see, I'm very fair. I'm one of those people. So when it comes to vitamin D, supplementation, fortification from foods, but mushrooms are a unique food that are particularly high in vitamin D, as well as egg yolks is another example. We're going to have egg recipes today. Eggs, we used to think that we could never eat egg yolks, but eggs and egg yolks are wonderfully healthy and a great source of vitamin D, as well as some other nutrients. Fish like sardines and salmons with edible bones, great calcium source, great vitamin D source, as well as some other seafood products are really wonderful for all the nutrients we talked about before. Nuts and seeds, particularly almonds, are really, really high in calcium, but in general, they're really high in phosphorus and magnesium. And again, that long list of nutrients I said before. Bright orange and yellow vegetables and fruits, that's where you're going to really get a big abundance of vitamin A, as well as your green leafy vegetables. So having a good source of vitamin A in your diet is really important for bone density and bone health. Whole grains. I'm going to make whole grains with oatmeal today, but a whole variety: brown rice, quinoa, amaranth, barley, have tons of magnesium and phosphorus and potassium in all the fruits and vegetables here as well. And of course, dark chocolate. I like to put something sweet on the list. It's a really, really good source of these minerals as well, and a very healthy sweet treat. So these are the list of foods. You could take a picture with your phone, or like I said before, we can send out these slides so you have a list. But these are the foods that are really emphasized when it comes to supporting bone health. And today we're going to talk about ways you can incorporate them in creative ways. Okay, so looking in the chat, I see some people said they didn't receive the recipes. Perfectly fine. If you put your email there, I'll make sure to get it to you this afternoon. Yes, as I said, I will send out the list so you don't have to write things down. And then you can definitely have the presentation for sure. Okay. I'm going to get to your oxalate question in a little bit. Phytates and oxalates. Okay. Let me demonstrate the first recipe first. Okay. Oh, one last question I see here. Exercise 30 minutes a day, that's 7 days. So we say a day, but that's the gold standard. That's the goal. So do the best you can. And if you're doing 2 days now, try to aim for 3. If you're doing 4, try to aim for 5. Just keep incrementally trying to get to 7. Okay, so the first recipe I'm going to demonstrate for you is called overnight oats. It's something you might have seen a lot in popularity, but I think it's a great summer recipe, a really, really wonderful way to get some whole grains, lots of different fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, as well as great sources of calcium. So I'm going to tilt my screen down so that you can see what I'm doing. Get a good, give me 1 second. Let me get a good camera angle here. There we go, perfection. Okay, so overnight oats is cold oats. Okay, so if you're used to eating hot oatmeal from during the winter time, this is a really nice option to have in the summer, because I personally don't like having hot oats in the summertime. And I also like the idea of this recipe because it's something you can prep the night before, and then your breakfast is perfectly ready in a little container in the refrigerator the next day. So this is a recipe that makes 2 portions, okay? Or, one for you and another person, or you can definitely save, just eat half and save the other half for the next day. Or you can make it in a larger batch and it will last for a couple of days in the refrigerator to have for multiple days of the week. So I'm starting with half a cup of old-fashioned oats. You can see here, they are the flat, normal kind. They are not quick cooking. They are not steel cut. They are just old-fashioned oats. and it's half a cup of raw oats. I'm going to add to this half a cup of fortified oat milk. Again, you can use whatever milk you want. You could use dairy milk, you could use soy milk, you could use rice milk, quinoa milk, almond milk, cashew milk. There's so many different milks these days. You could use whatever you want. You do want to try to find one that's fortified with calcium and vitamin D though, right? The other thing you want to try to find is an unsweetened version so that you can control the sweetness. Next, I'm going to add, it's about 4 ounces of plain Greek yogurt, which I've added some plain fresh vanilla extract to. You can take out the vanilla extract. You could substitute a nut extract. You could get creative here. This is just a method that I'm teaching you today, but it's really an idea to make this your own. The Greek yogurt obviously is a really good source of calcium. Not many of them are fortified with vitamin D, unfortunately, but they have a really good source of probiotics. Some of you asked in your pre-submitted questions about phytates and if they affect mineral absorption, particularly calcium absorption. We actually used to think that, but now we know that, you know, and they can slow the absorption of calcium, but they don't completely prevent it. And basically, if you incorporate, what the research is showing is it's still important to include phytates, like from whole grains and things like that. They can slow your absorption, but it's not a reason not to eat it. And it's also a really good idea to increase probiotics into your diet. That actually has been found to help with calcium absorption, even with the presence of phytates. So I hope that help answers your question. Additionally, soaking of grains like we're doing today with the oats, that helps to reduce the phytate content as well. All right. So giving that a really nice mix. And then I'm going to add some sweetness. So I'm using some maple syrup. You could use honey. You could use agave. You could use nothing. I am not a fan of artificial sweeteners, so you will never see me recommending that. Even ones that they say come from plants, I don't recommend those. I'd rather you sweeten it with fruit. I'm adding some ground cinnamon and some ground flaxseed. Ground flaxseed is a wonderful source of omega-3s as well as fiber, and some protein, vitamin E. Really, really wonderful for heart health, colon health. So I'm adding that in there. You could also add some chia seeds in here. I'm making this as a batch for pre-camp breakfast tomorrow, and my children don't really like chia seeds, so I'm leaving them out, but you could definitely add that. It'll make them thicker. So you're giving that a really nice mix. So you see it's like kind of liquidy. I'm going to show you what it looks like at the end of the program. But you see it's kind of liquidy. And as the oats absorb the water, it's going to get thicker. But that's pretty much it. That's all you do. I'll show you what they look like at the end of the program. And then I'll show you different toppings that you can add to it. So that's the base. And again, like I said, you could add chia seeds. You could add a dairy-free yogurt if you're vegan. The yogurt makes it thicker and adds probiotics to it, which is why I recommend adding it, but you could omit it if you really wanted to. Can you pop the overnight oats in the microwave to warm before eating? Sure, if you want to. I don't personally like the way it tastes. I think it's like a little, I don't like warm yogurt, but you definitely could. And you could omit the yogurt if you wanted to try it that way. I like the cold taste. I like the cold, refreshing oat taste in the summertime, but you can try it for sure. All right, so we're gonna finish that off at the end, but I wanted to show you what it looks like now, and then I'll show you what it looks like at the end, because you'll see as it gets thicker. It's a good science experiment too. You have kids at home. Okay, so bone building foods. We talked about the nutrients that they have. We talked about the list of foods you're trying to incorporate. Now, how do you do that? What are some creative ways? The emphasis, as you saw a lot from that list, is on what we call plant forward or vegetable sources of calcium and other nutrients. Plant forward means not vegan. Plant forward means not totally plant-based. It can be if you want to, but it means that you are more consciously eating plants as your dominant source. So meat and animal proteins are a side dish, and the emphasis is more on things that come from the earth. Okay, so plant forward style of eating is really going to be wonderful for your health and for building bone density. We used to push a lot of dairy, and it really doesn't have to be the case. A lot of people are dairy free these days. I think it's very individualized with dairy. Some people doesn't make them feel very good. Some people have no effect whatsoever. Lactose is totally not an issue for them. There's mixed research about whether or not it is effective for inflammation. Some people it does, some people it doesn't, but there's no causational study that I've seen that it definitively causes inflammation. And I know some of you asked a lot about inflammation in your pre-submitted questions. I actually did a class all about inflammation in April. So if you go to the video library for all of these programs, that's where they're placed. You can go back and watch that program because we talked all about inflammation there. But in general, a plant forward or plant-based style of eating is where you're going to really see a lot of effects from inflammation. But I recommend you go back and watch that one from April. And I think it's called Cooking for Reducing Disease Risk, Inflammation, and Arthritis. I think that's what it was called. So trying to work on incorporating these choices on a daily basis. So I mentioned before, lots of fruits and vegetables, potassium, vitamin A, the calcium, all the nutrients we discussed before. Orange and green are really where it's at. So green leafy vegetables, other than just having a salad, what do you mean, Amy? What does that mean? So we talk about green leafy vegetables. There are lots of ways you can incorporate it into your diet in the summertime. And for a really quick, fast meal, I love smoothies, not juicing. I'm not a fan of juicing, but in small portions, I do like smoothies as long as you're mixing it with a protein. So you could throw some spinach in there with some banana, some peanut butter, a little bit of berries maybe, and that would be a wonderful balanced smoothie versus just all fruit smoothie with no protein or no vegetables. It's a great way to eat green vegetables if you don't really like them. I promise you can't taste it, especially if you have a good blender. So if you're not a big green leafy vegetable person, that's a great way to get them in. You could chop them up really, really fine and saute them into egg dishes or to grain dishes. I do that. I will put them, like, chop it super, super fine and saute it with mushrooms and onions and put them into brown rice. It's a wonderful dish for having it. And you can see the green, but you can't taste it. Pestos and pasta sauces. We're going to talk about pesto today. I'm going to show you how to do that. And that's no cook, which is a really wonderful thing. Going to have soups and stews is also a really wonderful way to incorporate in some green vegetables into your diet, and to add them, especially all throughout the season, through the winter time, the fall, and to have make ahead recipes. You can put any green vegetable that's in season into a soup or a stew, or even a chili would be a great one. Adding to sandwiches, definitely whenever you can, not just an iceberg lettuce, but a dark green one like a spinach or a kale or a Swiss chard, or using it as your wrap is another option to wrap it in the green. Using cabbage and bok choy, adding it into stir fries. You can grill bok choy in its entirety, have on the barbecue. It's delicious. Making vinegar-based slaws for your summer barbecue side dishes. Bright and orange yellow produce you can add to anything. So I love adding squash to all my soups and stews, like butternut squash. You can buy it pre-cut up in the supermarket, which is even better. Last night I roasted it on a big tray with some cinnamon. It was delicious. I add pumpkin puree, the canned pumpkin puree, not pumpkin pie, but pumpkin puree to anything I can. I make it and add it to chilies, and it's delicious. It thickens the chili, but you can't taste it. You can add it to tomato sauces. Again, can't taste it. You can snack on peppers and carrots or puree cooked peppers and carrots into many things. You can also get creative with sweet potato, which we're going to do today. We're going to make sweet potato sandwiches or sweet potato toast. Great for our gluten-free friends, but also really nutrient-rich and fun, light for the summertime. So those are just some exciting different options that you can try. I see people asking for the link to the reducing inflammation video. I will put it in that link with the other link when this one is done as well. Okay, so I'll put them both together. Okay, so how do you get more whole grains and legumes, all rich in phosphorus and magnesium and potassium and things that we need to help produce our help promote bone health? Bootables. So bootables are a fun one. It's a way to have a salad and a grain bowl mixed together. So you're having raw lettuces and salads mixed together with some steamed quinoa or some steamed rice mixed in. It actually is a really nice variety of textures. Again, it's a good make ahead. You can top that with beans or lentils rinsed off from the can with other vegetables, or ones you've made yourself. That works too. Stir fries with edamame. I often, for stir fries, will make a multi-grain rice. I'll make a fried rice as well, with I'll take brown rice, but I'll also mix in quinoa. I'll mix in barley. I'll mix in other grains. So my kids think they're eating brown rice, but they're really eating a mix of things. And it gives a nice variety of textures too. Same thing with soups. You can add grains to mushroom barley soup. You can make a risotto with any type of grain. Farro risotto is really fun. If you've never tried farro, it's a really, really nutty grain. Gives a lot of variety there to just simply always eating rice. All different varieties of bean hummus. Hummus is just a method, and it just means pureed beans, right? So you can make edamame hummus. You could make garbanzo bean hummus, which is the traditional kind. You can also make black bean hummus. You can make any different kind. It's just throwing it all in the food processor. And then you can get a really, really good source of magnesium and phosphorus for sure. Toasted garbanzo beans instead of popcorn, you just toast them in the oven with some salt and some other seasoning or whatever seasoning you like. It's really, really crunchy and delicious. Lentil meatballs, black bean tacos, burritos, a whole different option that you guys can get creative with. Okay, so fish and eggs. As I mentioned before, having sardines and salmon with edible bones, definitely fish like that are really, really wonderful for vitamin D and for calcium content, as well as heart health and things like that. So sardines are, most people don't love popping them out and just throwing them in their mouth, or having grilled sardines has a very fishy taste. So you could, chop them very fine and add them to pasta sauces. It's very common in Southern Italian cooking. And you really can't taste it that much once they've kind of melted in. So that's a really good way to incorporate sardines. If you're not the biggest fan, people also add them into Caesar salad dressing or other salad dressings as a way to mask the taste, but still incorporating in the wonderful fish that it is. If you're not the biggest salmon fan, certainly baked or grilled salmon with lots of different sauces on top, but you can also try salmon cakes instead of crab cakes, for example, mixing it together with lots of herbs and spices and either throwing it in your air fryer or pan frying it very lightly, baking them in the oven. Raw salmon, this is actually a trick that I learned in my 20s, that when you cook salmon, it has a fishy taste, but when you eat it raw, it doesn't. So if it's affordable to you and something that you're willing to try and you're not the biggest salmon person, raw salmon like salmon sushi or sashimi is actually a lot, if it's safe for you to have, it is just as healthy for you and doesn't have that fishy taste. So it's a great way to incorporate that. And as I said, egg yolks. So don't throw away the yolk. Don't just have the whites. Have a whole egg 5 times per week. It's one egg 5 times a week is perfectly healthy, and try it so many different ways. I think eggs are one of the most wonderful foods we can incorporate into our cooking, into our lifestyle. It's fast, it's affordable. You can make cooking for one or cooking for a whole family. And it's so many ways you can use it. Frittatas, omelets, just plain scrambled eggs, hard-boiled eggs, fried egg and avocado toast, chopped up into fried rice, huevos rancheros, shakshuka, which is an awesome one. It's an Israeli dish where you are cooking the egg in tomato sauce and dip it with a crusty bread, maybe chop up some green vegetables into that tomato sauce. Delicious, perfect meal. I see another question here. A recipe for the lentil meatballs. Maybe that will be one for a future class. That's a good idea for a future class. That's a wonderful one. But there are lots of good recipes out there. I don't have one offhand, but I will definitely think about making that one for our next class. Nuts and seeds, again, can't speak highly enough about them. Grind them into your smoothies. Have a homemade trail mix. Skip the M&Ms and all that sugary stuff and just have dried fruit and nuts. Have nut butters into your baked goods, into your dips, nut flours into your baking, pesto, which we're going to make today. Add chopped nuts and seeds into your green dishes and your baked goods. On top of your salads. For a sweet treat, you can make dark chocolate and nut bark. Basically, you just melt a bunch of chocolate chips and spread them out on parchment paper and add some chopped nuts and raisins and let it cool and let it harden. And that's a really, really wonderful way to make your own affordable chocolate bar with nuts. But again, all small portions. So nuts have a lot of calories, and you definitely want to make sure that the portion of nuts that you're eating fits into the size of the palm of your hand. That's always a good rule of thumb, and not cupped together. It's just one palm, one palm. So having those in are going to give you a really great source of magnesium and phosphorus, calcium, especially if you're having almonds, and just a really wonderful source of nutrients all around. Okay, so we're going to start with making our pesto here. So, and I'm just going to be off camera for 1 second while I move my food processor. Whoop. Okay, so pesto is something I learned while I was living in Italy. And pesto is just a method for making a sauce, essentially, a non-cooked sauce. It's raw. And you can make it whatever you want it to be. Traditionally, pesto is made with basil and olive oil and Parmesan cheese and pine nuts, and really and garlic and salt, right? That's pretty much what it's made with. However, you can do whatever you want. I've seen pestos with pistachio nuts. I've seen pestos with almonds. I've seen pestos with seeds. I've seen pestos with no cheese. I've seen pestos with cheese. And you can really make it what you want. So this is a method that I'm teaching you. I'm encouraging you to make it this way because the almonds have a really good source of calcium, pumpkin seeds, a really wonderful source of magnesium, and it's just a nice flavor. And then I'm using half basil, half spinach to incorporate lots of green leafy vegetables in, but you could use a different green leafy vegetable. You could use only the green leafy vegetable and no basil. You could use, say you have allergic to nuts in your house, you could use only seeds. You could use no cheese if you want to. It just gives it a different flavor. If you omit the cheese though, I would add some salt. Yeah, so this is just a method. So I'm gonna tilt my screen down so you can see it, hoping this works out. Yep, there we go. Okay, perfection. All right, so when you do this, you're going to add whole almonds. Okay, I'm gonna add pumpkin seeds. So I'm gonna show you what they look like if you've never seen a pumpkin seed before. They're green, they're delicious. They're also called pepitas. If you see them in the store that way, it's the same thing. So you add as much garlic as you like. This is about 7 cloves of garlic. You could add 10 cloves of garlic if you wanted to. Really depends on your taste. I'm going to add 3 cups of spinach. And there are so many different ways you can use pesto. Pesto is one of the best things just to have on hand, because you could use it in so many ways. You could use it as a salad dressing. You could use it as a flavoring for chicken or fish, or a dip for vegetables. You could use it as something you put instead of tomato sauce on pizza. It's really endless. You could use it with a sandwich. My husband really likes it with eggs and tomato on a sandwich. So I'm going to pulse this. Hopefully you can still hear me. And you're going to grind this until it is pretty fine. And then I'm going to show you how you add the olive oil. Okay, so if you see, it's ground up. I'm gonna, mix this up one more time and use my spatula here to kind of like really mix it around. But the idea is just to grind it up, completely grind it up. You can also omit the garlic. If you're not a garlic person or you don't like raw garlic, you can omit it completely. It's a question I get a lot also, right? If you don't have a food processor, you could also use a blender. All right, so that's probably about as ground as it's gonna get without the oil. So when you're using the oil, the one thing I will say, you wanna use a really good quality olive oil here. That you're gonna taste it. You want the good nutrients and the good quality olive oil. So I'm gonna take this part out of my food processor. I'm gonna turn it on. This is about 1.5 cups. And I'm gonna pour it in a gentle stream through the food processor. And I'm gonna check it before I decide that I'm gonna add more oil. Because I don't like super oily pesto, but it does look like it needs a little more. And then the last thing we're gonna add is the really good Parmesan cheese. All right, here we go. We're gonna do it again. Again, this is something that you can make ahead of time. To make this ahead of time, you can freeze it in ice cube trays. If you freeze it, you want to add a layer of olive oil on top so that it kind of protects it in the freezer. But you could freeze it in little ice cube trays and then pop it out for whenever you need it. All right, so you can see it's about sauce-like consistency. It's definitely liquidy. It's ready for the cheese. And you want to use good quality ingredients here. Again, you don't want to use the ingredients that, can sit on the shelf for all eternity. The better the quality of your cheese and your olive oil, the better this will taste. Wish I had smell-o-vision for all of you, but it definitely is delicious. And that looks like about the consistency that I want. And some cooking, I give you a recipe, but some of cooking is about feel and having to learn what it feels like. I can't predict how much water content is going to be in my spinach and basil. If it was really watery, it would have needed less olive oil, right? If it was less watery, like it was today, it needed a little more. So you can't totally predict cooking all the time. All right, so I'll show you an up close picture of what the pesto looks like. You see there? It's like a beautiful, thicker sauce. We're going to come back to that later. I'll show you some ways that we can use it. Okay. I don't see any other questions right now. All right, so the next one is the sweet potato. Okay, so sweet potato toast is basically just making roasted thin slices of sweet potato that you're going to use as a toast, quote unquote. Okay, so I took my sweet potato and I cut off the ends, and this was a really long sweet potato, so I cut it in half, but I cut off the ends and I scrubbed it really, really well. Protecting my hands here, I'm going to cut it in about an inch thick slice, and I leave the skin because the skin has a lot of fiber. Okay, this one was even a little too thick, but I'm going to cut it like that. And this is very trendy. You might see it, in restaurants or on social media, but I think it's a good trendy one. Okay, so you see these pieces here, how thick they are. All right, so I'm going to take those pieces things out of my way here. I'm going to take these pieces and I'm going to spray them with cooking spray. If you're not comfortable with cooking spray, you could just take a little bit of oil and spray it on. This piece, I don't like the way that potato looks. Take that one out. Okay. I'm going to season it with salt and pepper. And I've preheated my oven to about 350 degrees. I'm going to show you the completed version through the magic of television. Okay, and I'm just going to take my tray and I'm going to pop it into the oven. I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so when it comes out of the oven, this is my beautiful roasted toast. So you see, it's got like a really nice roasting on it. Got about 2 pieces. And now here's where you make it your own. This is where it gets fun. Okay. So you can do it in lots and lots of different ways. So I'm going to show you a couple of different varieties. We're going to take some salad here on one of them. Actually, I'm going to do this on the bigger one. We made a fried egg. Right, you can even top it with a little more lettuce for presentation. Okay, on the other one, we'll take a fresh avocado. And this is where you really can get creative. You can do a sweet one. You could put almond butter and banana on top. For breakfast, say, you can cook them the night before. You could do hummus. It's another really fun one. I'm taking about 1/4 of the avocado, okay? You roast the sweet potatoes in the oven for about 15 minutes. See the question there? It's about 15 minutes. Maybe a little longer, maybe 20 minutes, depending on how hot your oven gets. All right, and you really, it's just like making toast. Just think about it like all the different ways that you would make toast. I'm adding some avocado, which is a really rich source of potassium. Okay, so I'm going to smear my toast here. Some avocado. Look how pretty that is. The green and the orange. Actually be a really good like appetizer, especially if you have like gluten-free friends coming over. Very empathetic option. I'm gonna put some tomatoes on top. Okay, so you can really have a good different variety here of options. Let me just see if there are other questions in the chat while I'm here. Okay, I don't see any others right now, but there we go. It's a delicious option. You could also, this is where I said I was going to be creative. You could take a drizzle of your pesto. Oops, you can't see what I'm doing. That would be helpful. You could take a little bit of your pesto here and put it on top of your eggs, because that would be a really good combo. The eggs with the salad. Apparently I can't do that and talk at the same time. Okay, here we go. I'm also going to show you the oats. I didn't forget about our oats. Do not forget about our oats. So after it's been sitting there for a little while, here are my oats. Okay, I topped it with some stuff for you, so you can see how thick the oats got, just like regular porridge oats, like you traditionally would. I put some blueberries in there because I really love blueberries in my oatmeal, some almonds, and then I put some shredded coconuts reflecting off the light. You can't see it really well, but you can mix this all together. You see how thick it is when I mix it. And that's a portion for 2 people. So I'm going to divide this in 2. You could top it with something crunchy if you want, but I think the nuts in there give it nice crunch. I love coconut, so I added some unsweetened shredded coconut. And we have our beautiful meals. But again, I tried to show you things today. First of all, that didn't require a lot of oven, because who likes to cook in the summer? In New York, it's super hot. So I don't really like to cook things that are going to be really hot. I want to do a lot of no cook. I want to do a lot of things that are really easy, especially if you're coming back from the pool or the beach or whatever. So things that are really simple and fast, and that everyone can make their own, like the sweet potato toast. Everybody can kind of make their own. You could do like a little buffet of toppings, and everybody can decide what to do. How long will the pesto last in the fridge? So the pesto in the fridge is like a few days. That's why I suggest putting it in an ice cream tray and freezing it in little cubes. And then you can put those little cubes, once they're frozen, in like a Ziploc bag or something like that. So you can just pop one of those out whenever you need it and just kind of let it thaw. You don't want to cook pesto unless you're like doing it with pizza or something like that. You don't really want to cook pesto. It's better as is. So just letting it defrost a little bit, then you can use it. You could also freeze it in like one of these containers and top it with like a 1/4 inch of oil, if you want to have like a whole batch of it like that. And then you could use it in so many different ways. Like I said, you could use it on toast, you could use it on pasta, you could use it on pizza, you could use it as a salad dressing, you could use it as a dip. You could use it as a spread, like for sandwiches. It's so versatile, and it's a way that you can incorporate lots of different types of greens, lots of different types of nuts and seeds, some cheese from the calcium from the cheese as well as from the greens, and a way to use up fresh herbs if you have an herb garden, especially a really great way to use up herbs, and just a simple go-to method. Seasoning for shrimp, or drizzle on some grilled steak or some chicken. Possibilities are endless. Possibilities are endless. So let me take a look and see if there are any other questions. I'm not sure if I'm seeing any others. I'm happy to answer any others, but I really want to thank you for joining me today. This program had a lot of good response, so I hope that it definitely met your expectations and gave you some good ideas, and that it inspired you, that you can really take ownership over your bone health and get excited about incorporating lots of different foods. It doesn't just have to be about dairy, no matter what you hear and read on TV or see in magazines or the internet, that there are lots of important ways that you can support your bone health, and fun ways to get creative in the kitchen, even in the summertime, even in the heat of July. So if there are no other questions, and thank you, I see some compliments in the chat. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. There will be a survey that pops up automatically on your screen. Please fill it out. It helps us support our funding that continues to provide these free programs. It also helps me to know feedback on how we can do better and what different types of topics you want to see presented. So please fill it out. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon.